Yehudit, a tale. The Jewish sacred canon was gradually built up between the 4th and the end of the 2nd century BCE, by which latter time it was complete. It included originally only the Torah or law, consisting merely of the Pentateuch. Next to be regarded as sacred was the section known as the prophets, which included the historical as well as prophetical works. Lastly, and always regarded as of somewhat less sanctity than the other two, was the miscellaneous collection of hagiographa, or writings embracing the rest of the Protestant Old Testament. The additional works known since the 5th century of the Common Era as the Apocrypha were rejected from the Palestinian canon, either because they were written later than 100 BCE, by which time the canon was definitely established, or because they were written, because though written earlier, they had not attained sufficiently high repute. Well, a lot of it was because of the language in which some of these things were thought to be originally written. If it wasn't written in Aramea, then, that's what Biblical Hebrew was called at the time. And if it didn't fit certain things, we find that the Protestants kicked out the Apocrypha, not because of historicity, because it fit in with the Orthodox and the Catholic doctrine more than it did the Protestant, was generally the thing, and it didn't, the repute, the taste of the people rather than authority is something that kind of happens. But by 540, actually, you have the what you could call Judaism, and it wasn't till the 2nd century BCE till you had it by name. But they were accepted as sacred by the more liberal Jews of Alexandria, were included by the Septuagint and Vulgate translations, and were officially placed on an equality with the rest of the Old Testament by the Roman Catholic Church at the Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563 of the Common Era. Now, we know that the Septuagint that they have isn't the Jewish Septuagint, which is only the 5 books. It's the Catholic one. And some of the translations are not translations, but interpolations, and they twist it a little more to make it sound like in a couple places, like maybe Christianity was presaged rather than condemned in its basic differences in belief. By the Church of England, on the other hand, they were admitted into the canon in a subordinate position for purposes of edification, but not for the establishment of doctrine. They appear in the King James versions as the books called Apocrypha between the Old and New Testaments, and were usually included in Protestant Bibles until about 60 years ago. From the literary point of view, their disappearance is regrettable. Since the purpose of the present edition is entirely edification and not doctrine, it seems fitting to include at least parts of the more notable apocryphal works. Of these, none is more famous than the patriotic tale of Yehudit, written in the 2nd century. Although the book is slightly inferior to Esther as a narrative, there's additional material in apocryphal portions of Esther. The central figure of Judith, celebrated in innumerable paintings and passages of literature, is both nobler and psychologically more interesting than that of the scheming concubine of the king Ahasuerus. And I think there's religious lessons to learn about this too. But even before Judaism, there were groups that, the 5 books of Moses and even some of the others did exist to some degree in manuscript form, although I'm not sure they knew when this book came out. And it's interesting, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with Joseph Smith and his doctrine of, that one doesn't, the Apocrypha isn't inspired or something like this, was at an age where they were a time where there was question whether or not to include it in the Bible. And, he took his stand. So, Yehudit, a tale. In the 18th year, the 22nd day of the 1st month, there was talk in the house of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Syrians, that he should, as he said, avenge himself on all the earth. So he called unto him all his officers and all his nobles, and communicated with them his secret counsel, and concluded the afflicting of the whole earth out of his own mouth. Then they decreed to destroy all flesh that did not obey the commandment of his mouth. And when he had ended his counsel, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of the Assyrians, called Holofernes, we're going Greek names or something, right? Maybe it's a Nush, the chief captain of his army, which was next to him, and said unto him, Thus saith the great king, the Lord of the whole earth, Behold, thou shalt go forth from my presence, and take with these men that trust in their own strength of footmen 120,000, and the number of horses with the riders 12,000. And they shall go against all the west country, because they disobeyed my commandment. And thou shalt declare unto them that they prepare for me earth and water. For I will go forth in my wrath against them, and I will cover the whole face of the earth with the feet of mine army. I will give them for a spoil unto them, so that their slain shall fill the valleys and brooks, and that the river shall be filled with their dead, till it overfloweth. And I will lead them captives in to the utmost parts of all the earth. Then Holofernes went forth from the presence of his lord, and called all the governors and captains, and the officers of the army of Assur, and he mustered the chosen men for the battle, as his lord had commanded him, unto 120,000, and 12,000 archers on horseback, and he ranged them, and as a great army is ordered for the war. And he took camels and donkeys for their carriages, a very great number, and sheep and oxen and goats without number for their provision, and plenty of victual for every man of the army, and very much gold and silver out of the king's house. And he went forth, and all his powers, to go before King Nebuchadnezzar in the voyage, and to cover all the face of the earth westward with their chariots and horsemen and their chosen footmen. A great number also of sundry countries came with them, like locusts, and like the sand of the earth, for the multitude was without number. And they went forth of Nineveh 3 days' journey toward the plain of Bechdelleth, and pitched from Bechdelleth near the mountain, which is at the left hand of the upper Sicilia, Cilicia. I want to say Sicilia, but that's not it. Then he took all his army, his footmen and horsemen and chariots, and went from thence into the hill country, and destroyed food and lewd, and spoiled all the children of Rasus and the children of Ismael, which were toward the wilderness at the south of the land of the Chelleans. Then he went over Euphrates, and went through Mesopotamia, and destroyed all the high cities that were upon the river Arbanai, till ye came to the sea. And he took borders of Cilicia, and killed all that resisted him, and came to the borders of Yapeth, which were toward the south over against Arabia. I don't remember how to spell the sons of Noah bit, but he compassed also all the children of Madian, and burned up their tabernacles, and spoiled their sheepcotes. Then he went down into the plains of Damascus in the time of the wheat harvest, and burned up all their fields, and destroyed their flocks and herds. Also he spoiled their cities, and utterly wasted their countries, and smote all their young men with the edge of the sword. Therefore the fear and dread of him fell upon all the inhabitants of the sea coast, which were in Sidon and Tyrus, and them that dwelt in Sur and Osina, or Akna, or something, and all that dwelt in Yamnan, and they dwelt in Azotus and Ascalon, feared them greatly. Now it's important to, in war, fight those who are fighting you. You don't have to destroy all the land, go around wreaking just destruction beyond what's necessary to subdue the enemy.